Hello. So by request from Tabor, I'm gonna make apple pie. So the first part of the apple pie is making the crust. So I've got the, it's Never Fail Pie Crust 2 in the all recipes thing, and I'll put that in the comments so you have the recipe there. But 4 cups of flour is what you start off with. And this makes a double crust, top and bottom, or 2 single crusts. So 4 cups of flour is already in there. And then there's a tablespoon of sugar and a teaspoon of salt. Already put that in there. And you put those in, and then you mix in your shortening into that. So I'm gonna just kind of stir that up first. The recipe calls for 2 cups of butter flavored shortening, but I usually just do 1 cup of the butter flavored shortening and then another cup of just plain. But it's fine if you use just the regular shortening or just the butter flavored. So the other thing then after you do this is then you mix this together and you kind of get little coarse pea-sized things. So I don't know if you have a pastry blender. If you don't, it's fine. You can just use a fork or a couple knives to go through. I'm just coating the shortening in the flour, and then you just kind of go through and cut it into little pieces. So these blenders are really nice if you don't have one. And they're not that expensive, a fairly low-tech tool. Alton Brown calls it a unitask item, but I use it for more than just pies. So technically this recipe says that it's a no roll recipe. I do still roll it out, but what's nice about that is that you don't have to, if it's not perfect, it's fine, and you can kind of patch your spots and stuff like that. So after I've got that mostly mixed up, I just kind of clean this pastry blender off to get the big chunks. Off of it. Get goopy. I actually remembered to take my rings off. Usually it's about when I'm ready to stick them in that I go through. So I'm just kind of just making sure all that loose flour on the bottom got turned up. So, all right, so that's how it looks. So then you put your wet ingredients in. This recipe calls for 1 tablespoon of vinegar, just white vinegar, and an egg. I can't do the fancy one-handed thing. And then the other thing it asks for is a 1/2 cup of ice water. So what I do is I put about a 1/2 cup of water in the cup and then put some ice in it while I'm mixing all the rest of this up. And then just pour off the little bit that's melted, so it's down to a 1/2 cup. And it's a little bit more than I thought it would be. Okay. Mix that in. And then I just take and just mix up with that. So you need to go through, you could, if you wanted to, beat the egg before you put it in, but I don't. I just make sure you get that stirred in here. Good. So this is where it starts to get the goopy part. And yes, I did wash my hands before I started. Okay, so I am just going to grab the flour that's out of the screen here just a second. I'm just going to put a little bit down just so that way it makes the counter less sticky. So this is pretty moist. Other flour crust or pie crust and stuff are a little bit less moist than what this one is, and that's okay. And so it's just basically bringing it together. You don't want to overwork it too much, just enough to bring it together. We're not really kneading this like we do like we did the noodles or anything like that either. So you could go straight into working with this and rolling it out, but I wouldn't. I would stick it in the fridge for a little bit. If you're going to go right into baking your apple pie, then that gives you time to put it in the fridge to while you're cutting the apples and doing all that part. So it is up to you. You can make this and a few days, up to about a week, I think I read, that you can put this into the fridge. And it's kind of nice if you've got a lot of stuff that you're baking. That way this goes through pretty quick, and that way one step is done, and you know that this is chilled. And the reason we put it in the fridge, just so that way it goes together a little bit easier when you're rolling it out later. Like I said, you don't have to roll this one out. I always do, but I've pushed in the pieces and stuff, the parts that are missing. So so it's a pretty big piece, and especially if I'm going to bake the pie here shortly and just prep my apples and all that stuff. So I put this in 2 packages or 2 portions, so just kind of divide in half. If you have one, make one just a little bit bigger, that way you know that's for your base. So I already went through with the cling wrap and tore off 2 pieces. Just plop that in and cover it up. And I kind of make it flat so that way it's easier. And I don't know if I made this one big enough, but we'll see. I'll probably kind of shape it a little bit so it'll work. So there's that. All right, so again, just kind of push that out. I'll stick those in the fridge. That's it for that part.